Hi, and welcome to our first podcast episode of 2025. I hope that the new year has been treating you well so far. Please let me know in the comments what you're working on right now. Grab your knitting project, grab a drink, and let's get started. Also, before we begin, please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any future episodes, and also like this video if you feel like it. I'll try and be quick with this one because good lighting in January is such a rare gift. It's such a finite resource. I don't really know if I can cram all of the stuff I have to show you before it starts getting dark. So yeah, let's start with the finished objects. My first finished object is something I started back in August, so I'm really glad to finally have it finished. And it's of course my lace doily, which I'm super pleased with. As you can see, it's already blocked and starched. I used pretty much all the pins I have in the house to block it out into a nice circle, which I think still came out pretty uneven, but nobody can tell, and it's gonna be a little secret. I had a lot of fun knitting this. I really like knitting lace, as I mentioned many times before, but as much as I had fun with the actual lace knitting portion, I hated this crochet border. I just despised it. It was so miserable. I used the smallest hook imaginable. It was like, I think 1.25 millimeter hook or even 1 millimeter. I had this, in hindsight, ridiculous idea that it would take me just one evening to cast off around the doily in this crochet border. After I was done with maybe this much, I started to feel physically nauseous from straining my eyes so hard. I kept just trying to hold on to this miserably small hook and also not to lose track of how many single crochets I'm doing in each loop. In the end, it took me more than a week to cast off this doily, which it felt like a chore every time I sat down to do it. I was just like, just do one more little repeat and then you can work on something more pleasant. I can't even imagine how much patience people who do multiple rounds of these crochet loops should have. I certainly don't have that much. I just went for one round and called it quits, blocked it. And my plan originally was to frame this. I even have the satin fabric specifically for that purpose, but I decided to gift this one because I found out that one of our really good family friends who we go way back with, she was a good friend of my late grandma. She was our neighbor, my mom's elementary school teacher, also my English teacher back when I was at school, and she is moving away to Germany where her family lives. She wants to be closer to her kids and grandkids, and it's kind of bittersweet because I'm happy for her. I'm happy that she will be with her family, but at the same time, seeing her was always a highlight of my visits to my hometown. She is such a beautiful and amazing person. She's just the best. So I will really miss her, and I wanted to knit something special for her. I thought of maybe doing a lace shawl, but it was right around the time when I was blocking the doily, and the more I looked at it, the more I realized that this is a perfect gift for her. She loves these like elaborate tea parties and table settings, fancy, cutesy china. So this will fit right into her interior, into her kind of homey, cozy lifestyle. So I'm really glad that I decided to gift this to her. I'll keep it for now, but as soon as I visit my hometown before she moves away, I will gladly give it to her, and I really hope that she will like it. So yeah, I'll have to knit myself another doily, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, because I do love doing it. The only downside of knitting this kind of lace is that it uses so little yarn. Like, it doesn't make any difference on the stash total if you're trying to cut down your stash yarn. I, by the way, reweighed all of my yarns, and turns out I have about 9 kilograms, which is crazy. I have this really ridiculous idea that by the end of the year, I want to cut down to maybe 5 kilograms. And when I say it out loud, I can feel the invisible clown makeup on my face, the invisible weightless clown wig, and this like round red nose, but I'll try my best. I would love to have less yarn in my stash just to, again, have a more manageable storage situation. I know that some people have a lot more than 9 kilograms, but I do live in a studio apartment and I mostly just knit for myself, so it's too much. I have to do something about it, which is interesting, again, to say, considering that I have some acquisitions to show you in this video, but regardless. The other finished object I want to show you is my sewn velvet bow, which I kind of teased in my December videos. I wasn't able to do it before Christmas or before the end of the year, but I did get around to it, and it was a lot easier than I expected. I was really afraid of working with this velvet knit stretchy fabric. I thought I won't be able to sew it without the special needle for knit fabric, but it was fine. The hardest part was actually cutting the fabric. It sheds everywhere. It's so awful. Every surface is covered in this dusty, velvety fur thing. It's just, I think I inhaled some. I think I inhaled a lot of it. If this bow took a few months of my lifespan, it's probably not worth it, but it's really cute nonetheless. I still find this velvet dust, even though I cleaned my apartment like a million times since I made this. I'm not sure I will be working with velvet again unless I really have to. I do want to make a scrunchie from the same velvet because I have some left over, but I don't know, I'm not really keen on this dust everywhere. What else can I say about this beautiful sewing project? I first wanted to stuff it with some loose hollow fiber, but because this velvet reflects the light in a really specific way, you could tell that it's individual pieces of fluff instead of one padding piece of fabric. What am I trying to say? Instead of one solid piece of padding fabrics. It's really plushy, but at the same time it's quite light. I was afraid that it's going to be really droopy and heavy, but it's not. I also tried to insert the quilt padding into the ribbon portion, but it made it look like this bow has legs. So I took it out and used some interfacing instead. Really cute, really useless because December is over, Christmas is over. Let's say I started my Christmas prep for 2025 early this year. So happy Christmas 2025. Let's move on. And speaking of bows, I did knit myself another December bow, which I'm super happy with. This is my fourth one. I made two on strings to use kind of like Christmas decorations, and then I made another one which I attached to a hair tie, and I've been wearing this one pretty much non-stop, so I decided it's time to make another one and use some odd quantities of yarn I have left in stash. So now I have two of these. Since I started having bangs, which I'm not sure this counts as bangs, but it does frame my face, I try to experiment with different ways to wear my hair up, and these little bows just make me feel so fancy. The only downside is now that it's winter, I need to kind of choose between wearing a hat and wearing a cute bow because I can't wear both. It just sticks out of my hat in a really awkward way, but I think when spring comes and when the weather kind of clears up a little bit and I don't have to wear a hat anymore, I will have a blast, and I'll probably knit myself a few more because it's such a beautifully genius stash busting project. It's perfect for those quantities that are too small to knit into anything else, but too big to just throw them out without any remorse. You can adjust it to basically any gauge, and it's really easy to calculate in a way that makes you use all of the yarn you have. So yeah, I really recommend the December bow pattern. And my last two finished objects are also a petite knit pattern. I knit two Sophie Scarves. I have to admit, I was really skeptical about this design for a long time because I felt like the scarf version, like the small version, is such a useless accessory. It won't protect you from the wind, it won't really cover your neck or keep you warm. Then I decided to give it a go. I don't know what came over me, I just decided I need to find something to use this yarn for. I had 25 grams of this Selma yarn left over, and it was impossible to pair it with anything. It's a hand-dyed yarn that has both dark and light specks in it. No matter which contrast color you use, it will still merge into your contrast color, especially if you're doing color work. So I had to use it on its own, and I decided I would try and make the Sophie scarf, and if it doesn't work, if I don't like it, I can just unravel it and do a December bow instead. But I ended up just absolutely loving this little scarf. I wore it like a million times. It's a little bit wrinkly. I either wrap it around my bag and just carry it around, or I wear it around my neck because right now the weather is really weird. Like, it can get really windy, but at the same time it's too hot for like bigger, bulkier scarves. Like, even my Berlin scarf is kind of too warm to wear in this weather, and this was a really convenient accessory to have. It does keep your neck warm and it does protect you from the wind. So excuse me, thank you. So like, I get it now. I get why it's so popular, and it's again such a great stash busting project. I paired the Selma yarn with some leftover silk mohair that also was too small of a quantity to use in anything else. And I immediately, after I finished this one, while it was blocking, I cast on the second Sophie scarf. This is Gepard Garn Pura Lana, and I had just one ball in this colorway. I bought a different colorway for a sweater. I ended up making a peacock cardigan from it, but when I bought it, I didn't know which project I will end up knitting with it, so I picked up just one ball of this to maybe do kind of a contrasting cuff or little color work on the cuff or on the neck. It was a dumb decision because even if I wanted to do that, one ball would have been too small of a quantity to do any contrast stuff on the sweater. I can't get any Gepard garn here. Like, if I want to buy it, I need to pay a lot for shipping, which I don't want to do just to pick up more of this colorway. It was just sitting in a ball, really lonely for more than 2 years. Decided to give it a go, and now I have a second Sophie scarf. For this one, I actually knit straight for some time before I started the decreases, but this one is kind of triangular in the middle because I started the decreases right after my last increase, which I was happy with. I tried to weigh this yarn just to use up as much as I can, but for both of these scarves, I still ended up having leftover yarn, which is so frustrating. What do I do with this? What the hell do I do with this? And that's all with the finished objects. I wanted to finish my Amy slipover this month, which technically is still possible, but unfortunately I ran out of one of the yarns I was knitting this with. I'm using 3 yarns held together for my Amy slipover. I'm using this standard sock yarn, just plain black sock yarn. This nylon mohair, it's not silk mohair, it's just on a nylon strand. And also for a little bit more of an interest in this plain design, I decided to use this silk mohair with some metallic in it. It gives an interesting kind of touch of glitter. I really wanted to have it finished as soon as possible. I really love this fabric with this, like, again, metallic glisten, but I realized that I won't have enough sock yarn to see it through to do the ribbons on the sides. And of course, as soon as I realized that I don't have enough, the universe made sure that all of the yarn stores in my area don't have any plain black sock yarn available, so I had to order it and wait for it to arrive, which it did finally yesterday, so now I can work on it tonight. There are a few things I want to say about this pattern. Well, first of all, good luck finding it because it's a sadness garn pattern. Also, even though it's a slipover and usually you feel like knitting a slipover is easier than knitting a sweater, you have to realize that you are knitting a slipover, a whole cowl, because this neckline is really huge, even though mine is a little bit smaller than the original pattern because I cast on more stitches on the shoulders here. It's still huge. I gave up at about 17-18 centimeters. You have to knit 20 centimeters and it's more than 150 stitches, I think. So yeah, you're doing a whole cowl in 2 and 2 rib. And that's not even the end of it, because for the ties, you have to have 400 stitches, even more, for each of the tie. You pick up some of the stitches from the shoulder and then you cast on more, and yeah, you're basically knitting like 4 Sophie scarves. So a slipover, a cowl, and 4 Sophie scarves, and it takes forever, unfortunately. I don't have anything bad in particular to say about this pattern. Or like, no, I do. I do. It has a mistake, first of all. It has a typo. At some point, it tells you to increase for the neckline into the shoulder. So this way, which again is probably a typo. It has the funniest line. It was the first time I laughed at a knitting pattern. At some point, it says, search the internet for videos on how to cast on with a crochet hook. Of course, the internet, the World Wide Web probably has a lot of good videos on how to cast on with a crochet hook, but usually video instructions are provided in the pattern, especially if it's a paid pattern, but I don't know. I don't want to sound too negative. It just made me laugh. Now that I look at it, I think I might block it before doing the ties, but at the same time, I might pick up stitches and put them on like a waste yarn, because I feel like if I block this now, the edges will get too tangled for me to pick up stitches from them. So maybe I won't be working on it tonight after all. Another work in progress I have for you is my baby, my pride and joy. By the way, this is not a project bag, it's merch from Ukrainian railways. It says Lviv, which is coincidentally the city I live in, and I just use it as a project bag. And this is my Lumme sweater, my second Lumme Pullover. The only reason I haven't finished this yet is because I really wanted to show it on the podcast while it was still a work in progress. I'm having so much fun with this project. I just adore it. I'm using Lettlopi for this instead of the recommended Cascades 220. The flower motif on the circular yoke is a lot bigger compared to the original pattern. I made it a lot more spread out. That's actually the reason why I decided to make it an all over colorwork leaf motif instead of keeping it plain after I'm done with the yoke design. In the original Lumme and the one I made before, this flower motif takes maybe like 1/3 of the total length of the sweater, but mine takes about a half. If I stop doing the color work at that point and just start to knit plain in one color, it would look like I gave up. Like I tried that and it just stops abruptly, doesn't look too good. It just looks like something is missing. So I had to play around with the shaping after I split for sleeves to make sure that my color work motif matches. And I ended up just doing an extra row of this dot motif. As you can see, I already finished one of the sleeves, but I think I might unravel this cuff portion and do something else because this doesn't look kind of finished enough for me. I might try a different design, maybe something similar to my F. Valley sweaters. Even if I have to unravel and redo it a couple of times, it's still fun for me. Like I'm having a lot of fun. It's a creative unraveling process, not a miserable unraveling. I just love it. It's gonna be so big and so oversized and so fluffy, and I'm gonna use most of the Lettlopi yarn I have in my stash, which is also amazing. Love this bag too. It's funny I mentioned miserable unraveling because remember my Moby sweater? Do you notice anything about this panel in particular? Yes, correct. It's not on the needles. And you know why? Because I'm frogging this. I'm saying goodbye to my Moby sweater. I'm not gonna be knitting it. I'm done. I give up. I feel defeated, honestly. Something just didn't click with me and this pattern. I tried really hard and I really wanted to knit it for my boyfriend because I felt like it would be a perfect special Christmas gift for him, but that didn't happen. I don't like this pattern. I don't get it. I love petite knit patterns usually. She is the most kind of straightforward and familiar pattern designer for me. Like I usually know exactly what she wants me to do when I'm reading her patterns, but with this one, I tried to do some armhole shaping because as I mentioned in one of the podcasts before, the original pattern doesn't have any. I also tried really hard to figure it out where I actually need to join the two sides for the body to knit in the round, and I feel like I missed the point. I made it kind of too long. I don't even know what to say. It feels like something's wrong with me. Like a lot of people had fun making this pattern. A lot of people have beautiful finished objects that they knit using this pattern, and I was convinced that I would be one of those people who have this sweater in their collection. Nothing seemed too complicated. Like it's not my first petite knit pattern, it's not my first cabled pattern. I'm quite an experienced and confident knitter, so I still have no idea what happened, but at the same time I decided that if the pattern and a project is making me so frustrated, I have the option to just stop, to just frog it and do something else. Like I don't have time for this. My boyfriend will not be mad at me if I knit a different sweater for him. It's not like he asked for the Moby sweater specifically. He won't be mad at me even if I don't knit a sweater for him. Like it's gonna be fine. I can use different yarn, I can use a different pattern. So I officially give up. This is gonna get frogged, or maybe not frogged for now because it's easier to store it in this little panel instead of the balls of frogged yarn. I'll still have to steam it once I frog it. Yeah, no, I have nothing else to say about it. Bye. Well, let's talk about something more pleasant. I have one more work in progress to show you. I decided to join my first ever knit along, and I cast on this Chantal sweater for this occasion. The knit along is hosted This knit along is hosted by Knitting Your Life, who is a fellow YouTuber, fellow knitting podcaster, and also a fellow Ukrainian. So you can check out her channel. I'm gonna link it. And we are all knitting something from the Chantal collection from Moroccan Knit. I'm knitting the classic Chantal sweater. It doesn't look like much now, but believe me, I got through the most difficult part because this is a saddle shoulder construction and there is shaping everywhere. Like, it was a lot of work, but this Chantal pattern is so thorough. She not only holds your hand, she kisses you on the cheek, she pats you on the back, she strokes your hair while you're knitting. She's with you every step of the way. Like, it's so easy to get it right, even though the construction is so complicated, if you just read through the patterns like maybe twice before you start. Sometimes it may even seem like it's too well written. For example, I decided to do a simpler way of shaping the back instead of the one described in the pattern, and I like it. I like how it came out. I just didn't feel like doing slip stitches on the purl side because this whole design, so hard to hold it up while it's like this. The sweater is knit in all over slip stitch pattern, and for example, for the saddle shoulders, she wants you to do one side with slipping the stitches on the purl side and the other with slipping them on the knit side, because otherwise you will have one more row on one of the shoulders. But I just did the extra row. I'm just gonna hide it inside the neckline anyway. I just didn't feel like slipping stitches on the purl side and just doing this like floaty thing. But again, I really recommend this pattern. I am a dumbass and I accidentally grabbed a smaller sized needle for one of the saddle shoulders, but again, it's gonna be a little secret. I hope it's not gonna be noticeable in the end. I also in general had to size down my needle to get gauge, which I think it's the first time I had to do it. It's so freaky that I'm knitting in 4mm needles instead of 4.5, and my gauge is the same because they feel a lot different like in my hands. Like, I feel like I should be knitting in 4.5mm needles. Does it make sense? But anyway, I got gauge, well, except on this shoulder where I used 3.5mm needle instead of 4. But yeah, now that I'm done with the most complicated part, I can just mostly knit straight and look at the pattern occasionally, as opposed to sitting with it like this, you know, with the designer always holding my hand, which again, I really appreciate, but I need my space. I need my space to just do mindless rows finally, instead of having to read through the pattern every other row. Yeah, the only thing I would highly recommend if you're knitting this pattern or anything that has a saddle shoulder construction is to weave in your ends as soon as possible. Don't leave them for later, because this looks neat enough only because I weaved in like 20 ends already. I don't know, like maybe 10. Maybe it feels like 20 because it literally felt like this piece of knitting had fringe all over. It's just a lot easier to keep track of what you're doing, especially if you're doing this complicated construction when you don't have these ends always getting in your way. So yeah, weave in your ends. And the yarn combo I'm using for this sweater is something I had in my stash for a while, like at least since 2020, which in my head makes it sound like I had it for a year at most, but let's not get into it. This is Yarna Iren, and I talked about this yarn before. This is a thin merino yarn. You can ply it together or use it on its own for embroidery or machine knitting. It's really silky, not scratchy, and also non-superwash as far as I know. It's a really interesting yarn, but it can get really fiddly and tangly, so not for everyone. And I'm pairing it with this boutique hand knitted mink cashmere, which I'm not sure even is cashmere, but it is really, really soft. It feels like cashmere. It feels like those Cardiff yarns, but I would not buy this again, to be honest. I don't feel comfortable supporting this yarn that I have no idea where it came from. Minks are notoriously badly treated in China and just in general, so I don't feel comfortable supporting this kind of yarn, even though it's not fur, it's just like fluff or like wool from the animal, and maybe it doesn't even have any mink in it, but still I want to try and support more ethical brands, or at least a brand where I can verify how they treat their animals. I do have it already. I bought it many years ago and it is quite soft and nice to work with, plus it pairs beautifully with this Iran yarn, so I'm just gonna use it up. I do really like this color though. It's such a beautiful deep wine red. I just It's delicious. And yeah, it's the same yarn I used for the December bow. When I was sorting through this yarn to see if I will have enough meterage to do the Chantal sweater, I found a few balls that had more strands of this Iren yarn than I needed, and I didn't want to just sit and kind of take out one strand out of 7 or something. So considering I had more than enough to do the Chantal sweater, I just used that thicker ball to make the December bow. And when I'm finished with the Chantal sweater, I'll have a matching accessory, which is super exciting. I'm so sorry about the lighting in this video. It got a lot more overcast since I started filming, so yeah, it's getting darker and darker by the minute. Nothing I can do about it, but I'm almost done. I wanted to show you some acquisitions, not a lot, but just a few. The boring acquisition I got was 1 extra ball of sock yarn to finish the Amy Slipover, but the not boring acquisition, one of the most fun yarns I bought in a while, is something I picked up when I went to my first knitting club gathering. I started going to these bi-weekly gatherings that my local yarn store organizes. Everyone is so nice and so kind. It feels so wonderful to be a part of this like offline physical knitting community where you can just talk about your projects, touch your works in progress, talk about different yarns, different constructions, maybe share some pattern gossip, which is also really important sometimes. And I just fell in love with, first of all, this yarn, which is a really deep cherry shade. It's really different to this wine red shade. It's more of a dark fuchsia. Still, I was so drawn to this color. This is hand dyed, but not on a silk mohair base, but just on a regular silk nylon base. And unfortunately, she only had 2 skeins of this mohair, which is 1,000 meters if you think about it, but still it would be too thin to pair with anything. I would have loved to make a really airy sweater similar to the Aura top or light loop sweater using 2 strands of this yarn, but alas, I don't think they'll dye more of this color. So instead I decided to pick up another hand-dyed mohair from the same collection. It does have the same fuchsia color and it's the same base, so I can just pair them together. However, kind of didn't take into account that this silk mohair, or not silk mohair, this thin mohair is even thinner than regular silk mohair. Well, this is a mouthful. Let me say that again. This mohair on the nylon base is thinner and longer in meterage compared to a regular silk mohair. For example, this one. This one is a lot fluffier and the base thread is a lot thicker. So this combo, even paired together, it's a lot more see-through, and I can't really use these 2 yarns held together for any patterns that ask for 2 strands of silk mohair. For example, the Stockholm sweater or puff tee. It's gonna be way too thin and open, even for the open gauge mohair project. So I had to really play around with different combinations, making about 1 billion swatches to try and see how I can work with this yarn. I don't want to add a 3rd strand into it because first of all, it will wash out the color completely, and also if I add another strand of silk mohair, it's gonna be way too fluffy for me, I think. So I ended up swatching on 375mm needle and liked the result. So this is what I have, and the gauge is close to the Stockholm sweater. It's also the first pattern I ever bought. Not only from Petite Knit, like in general, it's the first pattern I spend my money on. So a lot of fond memories surrounding that one. And also this cardigan I made was technically also made from the Stockholm V-neck sweater. So I decided I will try and do the same thing as with this cardigan, which again was made from the Stockholm sweater pattern. I would just not join it in the middle, and maybe I will not do the same kind of button band on it. Maybe I'll do an I-cord and some ties instead of buttons, but I'll have to play around with it. At least now I know that I will have enough yarn to kind of see the project through. I have a few more acquisitions I want to show you, but I don't think it's going to be today because, as I said, it's getting darker and I feel really anxious that it's going to be way too dark to watch this as a viewer, to like appreciate what I'm showing you. So I think I'm gonna leave it for another episode in which hopefully I will be able to show you my finished Amy Slipover and my finished Lumme sweater. So please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I would love to see you here again, and you can also follow me on Instagram or drop me a message there. I also have a Ravelry page where you can check out my current projects or previously finished objects. And also I have about 1,000 favorited patterns on Ravelry, so if you need some inspiration, you can just scroll through it forever. Anyway, I wish you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.